One of the biggest challenges to maintaining your garden throughout the summertime is how to water, how to keep plants looking good, especially when we start to get really hot temperatures in July and August and the plants really start to suffer. It seems like you're out there moving hoses and changing sprinklers and you know, watering constantly is what it feels like. So whatever you can do to try and save a little bit of time and definitely save a little bit of water and be more efficient watering is really a good thing. Can really not only save money but free up your time to do some other things and keep your garden looking good as well too. You know, traditional way of watering would be, you know, using a watering can or even a sprinkler. And the problem with using a sprinkler is it just puts water all over the place, and then all of a sudden you've got weeds popping up all over. And it's really nice to be able to go out with a watering can and just water individual plants, but the more plants you've got, the more work you have to do, the more time you have to spend with a watering can. So I've set up in my garden a system of soaker hoses, and an easy way to maintain those and keep those working throughout the summer with minimal work on my part, and it really is something very easy that you can do. So I've got soaker hoses that run down each of my rows. Here's two of them. So I've got one down my row of squashes here, and one down my row of cucumbers and squashes over here, and there's a quick connector on the end of each of these soaker hoses. Now these are 75-foot soaker hoses, and the beginning of the season I'll just roll those out into the garden, and at the end of the season I'll just roll them back up and put them in the shed, and they're stored away for the winter time, protected. I think this is the 4th year I've used these soaker hoses. They'll probably need to be replaced next year, so about every 4 or 5 years I'll probably end up replacing some of the soaker hoses. But I put these little quick connectors on and just screw those right into the female ends of these soaker hoses. And then I've got a couple garden hoses with Y connectors on there with valves, so I can turn the water on and off as needed. And so I've got a little bit of control over these on how it's going to work. And then they've got quick connectors on the ends of the hoses, and they just hook right in to my quick connectors. So you pull this little attachment back, it just slides on there and hooks in. So it takes me 2 seconds to reattach the hoses to each of the locations where they're supposed to go. So I can hook those up 2 at a time to my soaker hoses, and it's just super easy to do with those quick connectors. And they run down each and every row in my garden, whether it's corn or carrots or potatoes or tomatoes or even just decorative flowers, just to bring the bees and the pollinators in. I've got them hooked up on these soaker hoses with the quick connectors. At my water source I have a timer, and the timer's actually got 2 hookups, so I can run 2 different systems like this, so I can basically water 4 rows of my garden at the same time with a timer. And the timer's set up so it'll do a left and a right at intermittent intervals, and it will water for 6 hours at a time. So I have it set to run 6 hours on one hookup and 6 hours on the next hookup, and then it shuts itself off. And so once a day I'll come over and I'll move my hoses to whichever row I want to water and set my timer, and it will water 4 rows with 1 visit to my garden in 12 hours. And the soaker hoses, over a 6-hour period, they'll soak out about probably 16 inches or so. So I'll get about a 16-inch wide area where the water really penetrates nicely down into the soil. And then like in this area, there's going to be no water, so I have fewer weeds coming up in the areas where the water's not hitting, but the water's going right directly to the plants, right where the root system of the plants are going to be. So over here with my cucumbers, you know, the soaker hose goes right down the middle of the cucumbers, right where the root system is going to be, and it will water this section like right here. And I'll have a few weeds popping up right where the water is, but in the areas out from where there's no water, the only time the weeds pop up out here is when we get some rain. And so it really keeps my weeding down. I don't have to weed nearly as much. And then water is very conservative where I'm using it. It's just going right in the root zone, only goes on for 6 hours. Once, maybe twice a week is what I'll hit most of these plants, and that is sufficient to keep them, even through the really hot, dry part of the summer, to keep them looking good. So very easy to set up a timer like this. They're very inexpensive. Soaker hoses, easy to roll up and take care of and maintain in the off season as well as during the regular season. With those quick connectors, it just doesn't get any easier, and makes my watering job a much easier task through the summer, and I can spend time doing some of the things that I like to do.